On today's show, we redraft the 2019 NHL Draft. Stay tuned to know where Kaapo Kakko goes on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kellekesh, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the 2019 NHL Redraft. We've redrafted the 2019 NHL Draft class. We've looked at the top names from those drafts. There's a couple of 7th rounders that ended up in the top 15, as well as some 4th rounders, some late rounders. We kind of just break down the whole draft class and summarize it with a top 15 if the draft were to occur today, with 5 honorable mentions. So we'll go through picks 1 through 5 in the first segment. We'll go through picks 6 through 10 in the second, and then 11 through 15 in the third, with our honorable mentions as well, sprinkled in there. But before we get into any of this, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. If you're watching on YouTube, remember as usual to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode, and if you agree with our redraft, and if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So, Sebastian, let's get right into it here with the top 5, and we're going to start at number 1. Nothing changes on that side. It's still Jack Hughes as the top prospect from the 2019 NHL Draft. And for a while, it seemed like there was some doubt around that. In his first year in the NHL, it wasn't all, flowers and roses with Hughes. And since then, this game's really taken off, right? Like, what's changed on that side?
He had time to develop and learn the NHL game. It really was that simple in the end. And I mean, the raw tools with Jack Hughes were always absolutely elite, whether it be the absolutely fantastic skating ability. I mean, like in terms of rush attackers in the NHL, there are few that are more dynamic than Jack Hughes today, but also the playmaking skill, the handling are among the league's best. He's also progressed significantly as a goal scorer. There's just so much to like with this player. And I mean, through 325 NHL games, he's scored 300 points. He's been exceptional in terms of offensive production in New Jersey since his draft year. He's a point a game this season with 8 goals and 19 points in as many games, and he's been perpetually over a point a game the last 3 years now. So following that slightly slow rookie season where he only had those 21 points in 61 games, he's really been ramping up his production, and I don't think that New Jersey is regretting their choice at number one bit.
Absolutely. So let's move right on to number 2 here in our rankings, and it's Moritz Seider that we've gone with at number 2. Not an easy one. The next 3 here from 2 to 4 were kind of in the same kind of neck and neck race, but Seider takes the cake here in that tier. And Seider was picked at 6th overall in the 2019 NHL Draft. And that really shook some people up. Not a lot of people believed in Seider's potential. A lot of people saw him as a safe, steady, shutdown defenseman who'd probably top out as a second pair guy if everything works out right. But from the get-go, everything that's happened since his draft year has just proven Steve Yzerman right. And I think the main issue with why he was kind of picked, kind of pinned in that way is because of his play in the DL in his draft year. He really seemed like he was focusing a lot more on defense. There was a clear axis and focus on defense in his game, but that's really progressed over the last couple of years. And, since his draft year, the year that he spent in the AHL, followed by the year that he spent in the SHL, which isn't usual. Usually you see the opposite. But in Grand Rapids, he showed a bit more offensive chops while still continuing to develop his defensive game against pros. Then in the SHL, he put it all together. He became this offensive dynamo, this power play quarterback, fantastic defender in the SHL for Rögle, which has actually become a really good program over the last couple of years. They actually developed another prospect that's going to be in this ranking, although in the honorable mentions. But yeah, Seider's progression has been fantastic, and Yzerman clearly did his homework, evaluated that this is just a kid who's focused on defense this year, but that's not his whole game. We've seen more from him before offensively, and yeah, the way it's come together for Seider has been fantastic. Let's move on to number 3 here. We have Matt Boldy, who ends up as a third pick in the 2019 NHL Redraft. Talking about his game, what's progressed in his game since his draft year, and why he ends up at number 3 when he was picked at 12th overall in the 2019 NHL Draft.
Yeah, I mean, this is an all-around winger. He can do just about anything that is asked of him with the Minnesota Wild. And he was very much like a do-it-all winger as well in his draft year with the NTDP, but was overshadowed by perhaps more dynamic players and players with a bit more soft skill than he showed in his draft year, whether it be, of course, Jack Hughes and Cole Caufield, or even guys like Alex Turcotte in that season. But since being drafted, he's really refined his playmaking ability. He's added a lot more power into his game, and his power game is so cohesive with all of his other puck skills. It works in tandem so nicely, and he's been a fantastic complement to players like Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota. And this season he started off hot as well. He has 9 goals and 16 points through 15 games already. Last season he had 69 points in 75 games. He's been flirting with that point a game mark for a decent chunk of his career so far, going back to his rookie season where he had 39 points in 47 games. He's been very consistent with Minnesota and just taking steps as well in his defensive play year after year, which is the progression that you want to see from players like this. And it definitely was in the end a coin toss between him and the next player on our board here in Cole Caufield. I think that there are very reasonable arguments either direction there, but I think that with Matt Boldy, you have a bit more defensive quality, you have a bit more versatility as well. Boldy can play in just about any situation. He's competent in all 3 zones. With Caufield, of course, I think you have a bit more dynamic, pure offensive punch than you have with Boldy, but you, of course, also lack the power game that makes Boldy so special and has made him stand out repeatedly since his draft year. But talk me through Cole Caufield, because he was not very far off from even being ranked as high as number 2 in this redraft. He was certainly in that same tier as Boldy and Seider.
Yeah, for sure. I just think with Caufield, his game's a bit more unifaceted than those two. Like with Boldy, the ability to make plays on his backhand, the ability to get off the wall. He's the best in the draft in that, but he's also a goal scorer. He's also a stick handler. He's also a defensive stalwart as well for his team. Really a 3-zone impact player. With Seider, same thing. You've got the defensive shutdown skills. You've got the physical side, the ability to throw major hits and disrupt in transition, but you've also got the offense. With Caufield, the only thing that held him back from number 2 here is the fact that he's a fantastic goal scorer. He's the best goal scorer from this draft. But on the opposite side of things, yes, his playmaking's improved. Yes, his stick handling's improved. Yes, his defensive game is improved as well. But he's still a player who leans heavily on his shooting ability in order to be productive and effective in the NHL, right? Because that's kind of the thing with Caufield. But these undersized players, you need something to stand out offensively. And Caufield has that in this release. Again, best shooter in this draft class, bar none. I don't think there's any close comparables or seconds to him here. And yeah, that NTDP class is something I don't think we've really seen an NTDP draft class like this one. Certainly not this year. But overall, just a fantastic draft class. The top 3 of them are NTDP guys, and there's more to come. So we'll get into that soon. But just before, we'll take a break from the NTDP and go towards Thomas Harley, who's been really good for the Dallas Stars here. He ends up at 5 in our rankings here. And he was picked, I can't find it right now. Yeah, he was picked 18th overall in the draft class. His progression, he was kind of a late bloomer, wasn't he?
He was, and even in his draft year, there are definitely flashes of offensive skill, but he was very much framed as like this pretty solid 2-way defenseman that can be put in just about any situation and do decently well, where the upside very much seemed to be a second pairing role, and he's very much exceeded that at this point. Last season, he scored 15 goals and 47 points for the Dallas Stars in 79 games, and he's a really good skater, has an absolute bomb of a shot from the point, and can really be the quarterback on the cycle in the offensive zone. He's very capable running a power play unit on his own as well. And all that at 6'3" and 205 pounds as a left shot defenseman. He's a good frame. Defensively, he's certainly taken strides as well since his draft year. And one interesting thing was in his draft year, he was also an August 19th birthday. He was very young for the class and very much showed the added development that he had post-draft with that young birthday. So he's been very interesting to kind of keep an eye on in his development. He's at half a point a game so far this season while playing anywhere between 20 and 24 minutes a night in Dallas. And I mean, he's probably not going to end up as the first pairing left shot defenseman in that organization, considering that Miro Heiskanen exists. But in terms of a second string left shot defenseman, you really can't ask for much more than what Thomas Harley has been bringing to the Stars lineup for the past couple seasons now.
Absolutely. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into our second segment here where we talk about picks 6 through 10 in the 2019 NHL Redraft. But just before, a quick word from two new sponsors, Omaha Steaks and Select Quote.
Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NHL and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. Minimum purchase may apply.
Whether it's the World Series, a Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes always get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork also can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to help your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Now, overall, I mean, when it comes to life insurance policies, it's very important to be able to protect your family, your loved ones, if anything happens to you. And Select Quote has been very, very useful over the years in terms of helping with that. In sports, winning's everything, and that's why it's always important to have a good strategy to keep you moving towards the goalposts. Winning strategies for life are just as important, and that's why on my team, I have life insurance through Select Quote to protect my legacy and my family's financial future. Get on the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Just go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll be talking about picks 6 through 10 in the 2019 NHL Redraft. We'll start here at number 6 with our selection at number 6 overall here being Dylan Cozens of the Buffalo Sabres. He was a high pick in the 2019 NHL Draft, was drafted fairly high at, I want to say 7th overall? Yeah, 7th overall. And he's played really, really well. And it's another one of these players where at the start, I wasn't too sure that he would pan out the way that he would. But now this season, you ask any Buffalo Sabres fan, he is an integral part of their top 6, an integral part of what makes the Sabres an offensively gifted team. This is a team that's added a ton of draft capital over the years, has made some really quality picks from the likes of Tage Thompson, has made some great trades from the likes of great trades in the likes of Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch, but they've also added the likes of Cozens, the likes of Peterka, the likes of, some of the other guys more recently, Yuri Kulik, Noah Östlund. I mean, the list goes on and on and on in terms of the offensive talent on this team. But what makes Cozens an integral part of this offense? What does he bring that other teammates don't? How does he complement his players? I think the main answer to that is really playmaking skill, play driving through the middle of the ice. Do you agree?
I would. I think it's that paired with a really solid two-way impact, right? Like he's a player that elevates his line mates rather than being the one that necessarily gets the finishing touches on every single play. His point production hasn't been the strongest in the world, at least apart from that 22-23 season where he scored 31 points and 31 goals and 68 points in 81 games for Buffalo. Last year, he only hit the 47-point mark, and this season he's only had 7 points through 16 games. But he's a player that is so versatile in the forward lineup. He can play on the right wing, he can play down the middle. He's mainly been playing as a pivot for Buffalo. And as you mentioned, it's the playmaking skill. There's the power game that he also has. There's a lot of different things he can bring to the ice. And I definitely still think that there's more offense in him than he's been showing the last year or so, which is why he is coming in here at number 6 for us.
Absolutely. Let's move on to number 7 here. We have Bowen Byram, who still ends up fairly high in this list. He was drafted 4th overall in the 2019 NHL Draft to the Colorado Avalanche. Since then, he's been traded. Doesn't play for the Avalanche anymore. He plays for the Buffalo Sabres. That was a decent little trade that they made there with the Avalanche. 1-for-1 trade that ended up working really well for them. And Byram's always been about two-way impact. He's never been a purely offensive guy. He's never been a purely defensive guy. His talent rests right in the middle of those two aspects of the NHL game. And I don't think he's necessarily a prospect who a player who I would say I ever really saw as becoming a top pair defenseman. But he's working his way slowly but surely towards that. Again, with defensemen, you see a lot of these late bloomers where they don't really look really refined until they're 23, 24. Byram's still finding his game and figuring things out. But so far for the Sabres, I mean, he's averaged, about 20 minutes a night? Am I right about that?
A bit more, actually, so far this season. Like, he's had a couple games hitting the 24 minute mark. He even played 32-34 against the Calgary Flames the other day. So of course there have been injuries there. Mattias Samuelsson's been down, and Owen Power has also had a couple injury things this season. But it's been very interesting to see Bowen Byram flourishing in Buffalo. He has 10 points in 16 games so far this year, while not having to be the go-to guy on the blue line, which has really been very good for his game, being surrounded by players like, of course, Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power to take the load off on both ends of the ice in terms of playing those big defensive minutes, but also in terms of contributing offensively from the blue line. So I think that Buffalo is a really good landing spot for him. And of course, Casey Middlestat is doing some great things in Colorado as well. So the trade seems to be working out quite nicely for both sides.
Absolutely. Let's move on to number 8 in our rankings here. And at number 8, it was a tough tier here between the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 guys in this list. But we ended up with Trevor Zegras here at number 8. And I know the season's been on the score sheet pretty rough for him. 3 points in 14 games so far this season. But the impact on ice isn't bad at all. He's still highly creative, still the dynamic, skillful self that he is. We've seen his Michigan goals. We've seen his Michigan assists to, from behind the net. We've seen those skills, but they also translate in very interesting ways in transition. He's not, he's not a linear player who only gets skillful once he gets in the offensive zone. There are some weight shifts. There's some speed changes. He accelerates. He decelerates. He manipulates defenders in really interesting ways in transition as well. I think that's where his impact rests so far. He doesn't have the size of the next guy on the list. He doesn't have the high-end playmaking skill of the guy after him. But what he brings is dynamic skill in transition and just a fully unpredictable toolkit where you never know what he's going to do with the puck. That makes him really interesting. He keeps his potential fairly high. We're banking on the season just being an off year in terms of production, him getting unlucky, because I don't know. Talking to Ducks fans, it seems like he's still an integral part of that offense. So he ends up at number 8 here. Then at number 9, we have Kirby Dach, who finally gets the showing here. Was picked 3rd overall in the 2019 NHL Draft, ends up at 9th. Injury issues, we've heard it all. He missed a whole year in the 2023-24 season due to a knee injury he picked up in literally the second game of the season, which is very, very unfortunate. But he's come back pretty well since then. Has been an integral part of the Habs offense so far this year. He's currently on the first line with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield. And what makes Dach alluring is the size combination with the playmaking skill. I don't think he's a goal scorer. I don't think he really looks to shoot all that much. He's not. He's one of the most shot-averse players on the Habs. But the playmaking skills there, the transition skills there. He's got hands for days. He's 6'4". There's a really interesting toolkit to work with there. But do you think that Kent Hughes acquiring Dach for a 1st and 3rd round pick was fair value, or was this a kind of situation where it's too early to tell? What do you think?
I think it was fair value. I think that Chicago did the absolute most with that value that they received by going and picking Frank Nazar, who I think is a fantastic prospect. But
Yeah.
but I think Kirby Dach is a really really good player. I still am a very big fan of him. Hasn't like been back to his full form so far this season. He's had 1 goal and 7 points in 16 games so far, but the confidence on puck, the patience he has in manipulating defenders is really returning. As you mentioned, the playmaking skill is really what has always set him apart in the Habs lineup since that trade was made. And he's been using his physicality a lot more effectively too since returning from injury. I mean, he's 6'4", 216 pounds. You just wouldn't know it often while watching him play in terms of initiating contact or trying to go through contact rather than trying to dangle around it like he typically does. But I've seen more and more of those habits this season. And yeah, he's been really solid on that top line, complementing Nick Suzuki as a good transition driver and offensive playmaker, also allowing Suzuki to flourish a little bit more in his goal scoring elements so far this season. And he's been playing alongside Slafkovsky as well. So it's been that line for the last couple games in Montreal, and they've been very physically engaged and real puck hounds in the offensive zone, which has been nice to see. But certainly a player that I appreciate, and there's definitely still some room for growth as he continues to recover from his injury and return to top form. But next we have a player that has been underrated perpetually, in my opinion, and one that I'm quite a big fan of. At number 10, we have Mattias Maccelli, an even more dynamic playmaker than Kirby Dach is with the Utah Hockey Club, a really pacey, dynamic winger who hasn't been off to the hottest of starts this season, just like Dach has, with 7 points in 15 games so far. But over the past 2 seasons, he had 49 and 57 points for the Arizona Coyotes on a team that was very much lacking dynamic offensive talent. But talk me through his game, what made him a top 10 pick in this redraft.
Playmaking. He's one of the best passers, if not the best passer in this draft class. Ridiculous vision, ridiculous awareness of his surroundings. Plays pucks quickly, but it can also delay on puck, open up seams with little misdirections and deception. He looks off his passes. He connects with hard, accurate passes to the slot. He's constantly looking for teammates in dangerous areas. Fantastic playmaker. I think the combination of being undersized and not the most dynamic skater, I would say, was kind of the main thing in his draft year. His skating has improved though since his draft year. He's become a decent play driver. He's able to move pucks across lines, kind of break defenses with moves. So there's a really interesting offensive skill set here. But he's a pure offense player. He's not necessarily a type of player you're going to trust with defensive minutes. But that's our top 10 done. We'll get into 11 through 15 and our honorable mentions in just a second. But just before, a quick word for our sponsors at FanDuel.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take your swings on American football with the NFL or European football with the Champions League going at full throttle at this point, with half of the opening stage match days now in the rearview mirror, or perhaps you prefer tennis or golf, or if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to venture a guess that hockey may be one of your sports of choice. Whatever kind of sports fan you may be, FanDuel has something to offer you. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with picks 11 through 15 and our honorable mentions here. We have 5 honorable mentions to go through, so we'll go through these fairly quickly. And we'll start off at 11th overall with Dustin Wolf, who was picked in the 7th round by the Calgary Flames. He was picked by the Flames, right? Or was it the?
He was at 214th overall.
That's what
7th round.
That's what happens when you're a 5'11" goalie. NHL teams don't seem to like those. Hint, hint.
He's 6 feet now.
He's 6 feet now, which
yeah, he made
good
it
for him. And also, this is kind of the same thing that happened with the Ryerson Landers this past draft, and I think that's going to come back to bite some teams because they're seeing what Dustin Wolf is doing, has done so far at every level. Including the AHL and soon the NHL once the Calgary Flames figure out what they're doing in front of him defensively.
I mean, he still has a 913 this season despite all that.
Yep, absolutely. He's, I mean, when you're that good with your footwork, when you're that good of a puck tracker, I mean, that's kind of what you need when you're a 6-foot goalie in the NHL. But he figures it out really, really well. And I think that when you see a goalie just exceed expectations at every level, dominate at every level, be the best goalie in his league at every level, at some point you got to bet on that translating to the NHL. It's very rare that we see that from any prospect in any position. They're the best player everywhere they play, and then they get to the NHL and they're just not. He's very, very good. Again, great footwork, great puck tracking, really good vision and awareness of what's going on around him. He's explosive in the crease. He's one of those rare 6-foot goalies that play a bit deeper and rely on the reflexes and tracking rather than covering more net by challenging shooters aggressively. So I like his game overall. Really, really big fan. But moving on to number 12, Shane Pinto, the center of the Ottawa Senators. Talk me through his game and what makes him the 12th overall selection in our 2019 NHL Redraft.
He's a good two-way center who has a physical impact at 6'3" and 201 pounds and has real goal scoring upside too. This is a player that has already scored 20 goals in the NHL in a season in his rookie campaign. His first full season in the NHL, that was in 22-23, where he scored 20 goals and 35 points in a full 82 game schedule. And then last season, after missing the entire first half of the season, he played 41 games and had 9 goals and 27 points. This season has been a bit of a slow start, but he's also missed a bit of time to injury, playing 7 games and logging 3 points. But he's a very, very solid player that you know what to expect from shift to shift, and just delivers very consistent performances while also being pretty good for a depth goal relatively regularly. So definitely a player that the Ottawa Senators value quite highly, and I think that he's certainly deserving of a top 15 spot on our board. But the next player is one that I was pushing for this redraft, which is Alex Vlasic, the 6'6", 216-pound left shot defenseman of the Chicago Blackhawks, was a second-round pick at 43rd overall. And while he isn't the biggest offensive producer in the world, I mean, he still has as many points as Kirby Dach and Mattias Maccelli do this season so far with 7 and 16. He is fantastic defensively, a true shutdown defender who's really improved his skating ability since his draft year. Really powerful lower body. His really good integration of C-cuts while defending the rush. He can close his gaps very aggressively, takes up as much space as he possibly can, and has one of the longer reaches in the entire NHL. So a player that is just an octopus in the defensive zone and can just completely contain and kill plays like very few other defensemen in this draft class can. And a player that I also could have easily seen a bit higher on this board. But next we have a player that you're the one championing, and I was unaware of just how good he's been so far this season. Connor McMichael has 10 goals and 16 points in 14 games this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's mainly because of his improvement in terms of timing in the offensive zone. He drives the net with the right timing. He's not overskating his lanes or just shooting past defenders to the net before the puck can get to him. He's really working on his timing, slowing down, speeding up, kind of manipulating tempo in the offensive zone is really kind of the main improvement of Michael's game, and it's come a long way in terms of his progression. He's always been a very intense, really good dual threat offensive player, but there were some issues around that processing, that hockey sense, that have really come a decent way since his draft year. So 14 is more than reasonable. Then at 15, around out the top 15, Pavel Dorofeyev has been having a pretty good season so far for the Vegas Golden Knights in a mainly second line role. He's put up decent point totals, been doing fairly well on that side. And Dorofeyev is a prospect that I really didn't watch much of heading into last year. And I've been really, really surprised with the amount of skill that he's brought to the game. I mean, in terms of point totals right now, what's he at? I think he's at 8 points in 12 games, something like that.
8 goals and 11 points in 15 games.
Yeah, he's been doing really, really well. Really dynamic scoring force. He loves to shoot in motion, keeps his feet moving through contact, and just rifles pucks past goalies. So he's got a really interesting toolkit as an offensive player. And I'm betting on that continuing if he's playing second line minutes on a team as strong as the Vegas Golden Knights. That's a very, very good position for him to be in. But let's get into the honorable mentions. We have 5 of them, including, unfortunately, Kaapo Kakko, who was picked second overall and is up just outside of our top 15 here. Mainly because the production hasn't really come. He's playing about 11 to 12 minutes right now for the Rangers. I know they're a good team, but he's a former second overall pick from 5 years ago. That's more than enough time to progress as a forward, and it just hasn't shown the level of progression that people have been expecting from him. It's just been a disappointing couple of years so far, mainly because he's never really learned to use his frame in productive ways. He didn't need to in Liga. He didn't need to in J20. So he hasn't really adapted to the fact that, he's not the biggest, strongest player by default on the ice anytime he's there. So that's been a difficult progression for him. Then Alex Newhook at 17th, the dynamic, speedy scorer of the Montreal Canadiens. It's all about pace with him. He outspeeds players. He outthinks them in transition, moves across their hands and shoots hard. And he always plays hard. That's the main thing. He's got the intensity to compensate for his lack of size, which makes him an impactful player. At 18th, though, a prospect who is very contentious in terms of our honorable mentions here. Cam York has been on a steep progression since last year, right?
He has been. He's been very solid with the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, last season, a year where he almost seemed primed for a first power play role with Philadelphia before Travis Sleinheim decided to just absolutely make massive strides in his development at like 26 or 27 years old that year. But he still managed to score 30 points in 82 games. This season, he has 2 goals and 3 points in 7 games. And he's a really skilled and intelligent, smooth skating defenseman who can play on both ends of the ice. He's a really good puck mover. I like his ability to carry the puck as well. I'd like to see a bit more of that than I've seen so far at the NHL level. But overall, he can do just about anything you want a 5'11" puck-moving defenseman to do. He facilitates play. He elevates line mates. He certainly needs to be insulated by a bit more of a physical force on the blue line because he isn't quite that. But overall, he's a really solid puck-moving defenseman that I definitely think can be a number 4 or number 3 longer term for Philadelphia. But the last forward on our list here as our in the HM categories is Nils Hoglander of the Vancouver Canucks, who had a really good resurgent year last season with 24 goals and 36 points in 80 games. He's a player that I've always had a real appreciation for, whether it be through his stick handling, his goal scoring habits, and his just unrelenting work ethic. There's a lot to like in this player. A true high octane motor, and at 5'9", 185, you need that. And he's been learning under the tutelage of Connor Garland, which works quite nicely if you're trying to cement yourself in that role. But Hattie, talk me through the final player in the HMs here, a player that probably should still be an Edmonton Oiler if they made some better decisions in the offseason,
Yep.
Filip Broberg.
Yeah, absolutely. He was offer sheeted by the St. Louis Blues and has been doing very well for them since then. He's a smooth skating 6'4" defender with impressive range, really good rush defender. And he's been growing his offensive game, especially in terms of how he uses his blue line presence. He's not just ripping pucks from the point willy-nilly. He's manipulating laterally. He's finding shooting lanes. He's playing small give and goes into space at times. There's some interesting offensive tools that are developing slowly but surely with Broberg. I still think the sense is really what keeps him outside of the top 15 here in terms of a redraft. Not necessarily the smartest player on or off puck, but in terms of his tools, there are very little defenders who can keep up with the amount of range and mobility and just pure, like I said, tools that he has. So that keeps him in the top 20 for sure. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode and what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For a second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of November. So, I've been Hattie Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.